Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of FreeThought Hour. Now, of course, I'm lucky enough to have my co-host with me, Tercia Duplessis, who is suffering a bit from, what do they call it? Load shedding in South Africa. Tell us about it, Tercia.
Well, our government looted the money so that our electricity provider doesn't have the capacity to satisfy the needs of the grid. So we have what's called load shedding. But it gives me the opportunity to use my beautiful candelabra with 5 candles. And I do have to confess that I quite like the warm glow of candlelight on my complexion.
It's very romantic, especially with the dark background too. Yes. So why isn't it flickering like flames should?
Well, I've trimmed the wicks. I've trimmed the wicks.
Oh, so those steady flames.
It might flicker. It might begin to flicker any moment now. So
okay, we'll look after that then. So I'm just about to introduce our guest. And, normally I say, because this is the internet, we could be anywhere. And my example of anywhere is I could be up a tree in the Philippines. Well, tonight, our guest is in the Philippines. Welcome, James Mc Quinn. How the devil are you?
Good. Wow, we're speaking quite a triangle here between me and you guys.
Yeah,
we are global. A global show.
Yeah.
Well,
Andrew, sorry?
I do hope you're not up a tree.
No, I came down for the interview. Trying to get I can't get up them here anyway. They don't have branches. You got to go all the way up for the coconuts. And
Okay.
But you are a hero because the world being not flat, unfortunately, where you are is turned round and it's out of sight of the sun, and it's 3 a.m. I believe.
Yeah, 3:30. Yeah, 3:33. So it's I can never understand why some of these people believe in the flat Earth when all you got to do is have a chat friend far away, and you've kind of solved that one already.
Yeah, or take a jet flight and travel through time. Yeah.
I remember sitting and coming up doing a Philippine trip in the past, coming up over the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
And of course there you can I notice a lot of people not aware of what's outside the window. It's a long flight and they're hanging. But I like looking around because you can't see the sun, but you can see the daylight, you can see the evening. You can see the morning and you can see the night depending on what windows you're looking out.
Yeah. Sometimes you look down and see the clouds.
Yeah, way down below you. Yeah.
Well, if you look carefully, you can actually see the curvature as well.
If you're up high enough. Yeah, there's
and if the conditions are right, because I actually saw that on our recent flight to the UK, and I wonder how many of the people who flew with me were flat earthers, because I would have woken them all up and said, "Don't believe the lie." So, is that the biggest lie, Andrew? That the Earth is flat, or is there a bigger one?
Well, it is a lie at this point. It's not ignorant. It can't be ignorant. I can't understand that. Yeah, the world's biggest lie is religion, because belief in a creator, I don't think is a lie. That's ignorance, and then religion was purposely built on that, harnessed it, and and even Putin, they love the lie. They can use it. The Republican Party of the U.S. It's a great tool.
Yeah. So they're making use of the ignorance to their advantage, and that's where the lie comes in. Yeah.
Whoever, like as I always said, whichever religion it is, someone was the first one to come up with it, so that they know that they're lying, whether it's Mormonism or whatever. designed lie. Yeah.
So how did you come to this point of view? How did you get to be the Andrew that you are today? Because you've got an interesting backstory, haven't you? You started in Canada and now you're in the Philippines. What's going on? Tell us a bit about.
I met a woman. Well, go way back in time.
Go to the beginning. Yeah.
I love stories on pirates and the Caribbean and things like that. So the Philippines is an English-speaking place as well. It's a second language here. So, I was attracted to that alone, let alone, like when I met someone here. But of course, I run into the frustrations of how the society works based on, church and state. So it just goes with the it goes with the territory. But it's an eye opener. You see the differences that church involvement makes in everything, even medical. Like you can.
Is that Roman Catholic where you are, or Muslim? Yeah, Catholic.
It's Catholic. I mean, there's definite Muslim presence. Probably growing a bit in the South, because when people have no real background education, they can be swayed into anything. And if ISIS wants to right now expand, it's pretty hard to do that in a democracy. Yeah.
The lady that you met, I presume you're still partners. And something that I spent some time in Greece in 1990, and that was where I met. I was working as an au pair, and most of the other au pairs were actually Filipino ladies, and I was struck by how extremely religious they were. So as a religious person at that time myself, I actually went to church a few times with some of the Filipino girls that I befriended, and most of them were actually quite charismatic. So, but the Philippines is mostly Catholic, if it's religious, as we know. So, have you ever witnessed one of those events that I do know is popular around about Easter, where they have, especially in the Philippines, where people have these mock crucifixion, crucify themselves? Have you ever witnessed anything like that? Have you experienced the frenzy that people go into?
No, I haven't seen that myself, but I do remember seeing their version of Halloween. I thought it was a long funeral procession. Yeah. For them, I think they call it All Hallows Day, or what do they call it?
Yeah, All Hallows.
So it wasn't a trick or treating thing. We're going around and dressing up. It was a time to march and think of the ancestors that passed on.
Yeah.
So kind of different.
Yeah.
How long have you been living?
Sorry?
How long have you been living in the Philippines?
Oh, not long. Like I arrived here late August. I just normally, since I retired in 2017, I try to spend about 6 months a year here, 6, 7, and then of course the pandemic hit us.
Yeah.
And I was writing this book. I'll just show it anyway. I was writing. I was doing the manuscript. I began it in this country, and I was thinking, before I'm finished, I want to find a publisher. Maybe I should go home. The pandemic hasn't really felt at the time. But when I left, I booked a flight, changed the flight from April to March. When I arrived in Toronto, Manila had just locked down because of the pandemic. Right when I finished that flight, I probably took one of the last flights out of there to Canada. I would have.
A close escape.
Yeah, it was just luck. I just thought, praise the Lord. He's wanted me to write this book so badly. He got me out of there and
Yeah.
spared all kinds of things. That's not prayers answers, just luck. But it's I like to throw that in their face.
Yes.
So how long did it take you to complete the manuscript?
Probably about close to 18 months, I would say, because I wasn't just right. If it was fiction, I could have rattled through it probably in about 4 months, maybe. I don't know, but it's because it's not fiction. I have to research, and I communicated. I was lucky enough to communicate with Dr. Richard Carrier, who
Oh,
is,
wow.
I think he's probably the foremost authority really on Christianity at this point.
Mm.
There's some
He's been
differing.
on our show.
Sorry. Oh, you've interviewed him?
Yeah. Mm. Great
Yeah.
guy.
He's a likable man. I had questions for him, and he would give me lengthy answers. Just very helpful.
Yeah.
He's very passionate. He's very passionate about his field. Andrew, so did you grow up Christian?
My extended family, like relatives, very Christian all around us, both sides of the family, both sides of my parents. But my father was atheist, even though he was in a Christian family, just because it was too ridiculous. And one of his best friends from childhood became one of Canada's top astronomers.
Uh-huh.
Wow. So I grew up with a free mind, which I understand. Somebody told me a couple of years ago, actually, it influenced a paragraph in the book, that they were born into Christianity. And they said there's a very big difference between a born again and someone who was born into the religion. And they're right. I think that they're born again. I think it's just out of pure ignorance of facts against it. But if you were born into it, I mean, what can you do about that? And sometimes some of the studies have shown that it does affect reasoning and logic.
Yeah.
There's a 63-person study that was done in the UK, actually. It was written about it. Yeah, I think I refer to it in my book anyway. But
I'd like to know about that, and I'd like to put the details of that underneath this video. Anyway, I would contend, it's my contention that atheism is our birthright, because when you think about it, when we're born, we can't walk and we can't talk.
That's right. You learn.
And so we can't possibly have heard of any gods.
No, that's right.
At that stage, we don't have enough. We don't have enough language to have picked up these ideas that people may be throwing about in front of us. That there's a God. So I contend that it's our birthright to be an atheist. And what happens is that's taken away from us by people who teach us nonsense in order to control us.
Yeah, I would say if we were born and we weren't educated like we can be today, that a lot of us would wonder and want answers, and maybe you might come up with a creator of your own identity. But that's not a religion, though. That's not a religion. That's not filled with dogmas. And besides, I always thought whoever, all these different people, like Richard Carrier says, we find exactly what you would expect to find if man invented God. There's many different ones in different parts of the world, isolated from the others. That's exactly what you would expect to find. And it's our birthright to not have an indoctrination.
Yeah. You said something really profound when you said that people who have the access to the type of education that we can get relatively easily today, even in very poor parts of the world, really have no excuse to make up or believe in any form of religion unless they are young enough when they are first indoctrinated into it. And if you live in South Africa, I don't know what the situation is in the Philippines, but if you live in South Africa, then you are indoctrinated at school by your teachers. Even if you are spared indoctrination at home, you are indoctrinated at school.
Yeah, an atheist home here would be rare, and it would be at odds with the education. So, you know, I would think that they would be. I don't know, what would you teach your children? I guess just this is the way that the country is. So, some of the science they're going to teach, you're going to leave out certain things.
Yeah.
Because, but oh, you said something, and I'm just trying to grab onto what it was.
Well, going back to how you acquire religion, it's my contention that we're born without it, simply because we can't communicate at birth. But then, as we learn how to communicate, as we get language, that's when we get theism. That's when, because the language is all wrapped up with these concepts of godliness and creation and what have you, morality and what have you. So that point, when we're still, you know, not even toddlers, that at that point we're acquiring our first religion without any choice. And it's going to be the prevalent one in the culture that you find yourself in, which is why, as you said, religions are geographically located. You know, they spread out from a center, like a bacterial colony.
And we have to learn them from other people. We're always doing God's work. We always do God's work. Again, exactly as if what we would expect to find if man invented God. Man does all the work. The prayers are answered by either luck or people running to someone's aid, or and I remember what she had said was the fact that today we have the answers easily obtainable. It's the bias, the dogmas cause in religions that prevent us from learning what's right under our nose. It's incredible. Like, there's so much information available, including the wrong stuff, that our bias is going to lead us one way or another. And so once you're grounded in certain facts, the chances are if you're going to be biased towards the truth or research or skepticism, and you're always going to find out. You're going to figure it out. But if you don't have that as a basis, you can be misled into anything, and it's sure apparent right now. It's just nuts. And we have Americans and probably UK and everything who are actually embracing the propaganda that Putin has just for his isolated Russians, so that they will go and kill their brothers, sisters next door. He's got to invent a reason, Nazis, things like that. We're getting it here. It's
because there's always a few people who like a conspiracy theory. They like to swim against the tide of mainstream thinking, just to be different, just to be contrary.
John, you mentioned conspiracy theory. Andrew, would you say that religion is a type of conspiracy theory? Maybe the oldest one?
Well, maybe it is, but one of the things I've always said was that a lot of these conspiracy theories are not theories. They don't qualify as a hypothesis because there's not a shred of fact in it. So by the definition there, it would be it's almost like more like propaganda, but
or at best, just a guess.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a guess that that becomes fact.
Well, that's one of the problems, isn't it?
I mean, fact as far as people put their lives on it.
Yes,
They'll
yes,
kill others for it, or they will die for it, and it's
yes.
complete hogwash. It's just staggering.
Unfortunately, there's a tendency, if something's repeated often enough, and was it
Yeah.
the Nazi propagandist Goebbels who said this? We tend, the more it's repeated, the more we tend to believe it.
Believe it. Yeah.
That's what Donald Trump does.
Yes.
That's why he will not let go of it. It's almost word for word. It's so boring. It's like, what's wrong with this guy? Dementia. He just keeps repeating things. But there's a reason for it. It works. It's like a dogma. It's a dogma.
Yeah,
it becomes a dogma that way. Yeah.
Or mantra. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Andrew, how strong is the influence of religion in daily life, in working as somebody who's retired? So do you experience that people are superstitious? Has it affected how people coped with the pandemic, for example, and how people evaluate sources of information? I have no idea what life is like in the Philippines, so.
Well, for example, the vaccine scare, the hype propaganda, that hit here as well. So that was all, pretty much Trumpism. And then it goes back a ways where someone, I don't know if they're from the UK or not, but they had started a rumor that they were a doctor, and they had said that vaccines were responsible for autism, and that had been they've been busted and proven over and over and over again that was false. But so that really was the origin of that. But because vaccines throughout history have worked, and we used them, and we didn't deny them. It wasn't against our right; it was our privilege to have one. But that propaganda reached all the way over here. So there's a lot of people that aren't vaccinated, and I think they're fortunate that they haven't died. So there's some that have. There was a girl across the street from here who was immune compromised, and she had I think some blood disorder or cancer or something. Anyway, but she was coping with it, and she'd come back from the hospital from treatments and caught COVID in the hospital and died on her way to the hospital. But they didn't give her a vaccination because she was immune compromised instead of giving her the vaccination because it was, that's the logic that's lacking. And I blame church and state involvement in education from the onset. Like in a high school textbook, there's a paragraph or two on Darwinism for evolution. I mean, that's 150 whatever years old.
Yeah. Well, you're right. He was a British doctor, Andrew Wakefield, and he was unfrocked. Is that the right word for when a doctor is?
Well, it works.
yeah, you know what I mean. So what did he do? He went to America, where he still peddles his same lies and gets paid lots of money for it.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's all comes down to money. Evangelicalism, a lot of the GOP, Ted Cruz. It's all about money. Trump, the more he lies, the more money he makes.
Yeah.
There's no shortage, of gullible people with wallets that they just got to get rid of some money.
And they will pay to have their biases confirmed.
And of course, that's exactly how religion works, because it's exactly the same principle. That's how you do it, because you get people to embrace it so fully that they actually suspend their disbelief, and there is a sense of comfort in it. Uh,
Mm.
I can imagine a person growing up without any religion or education, sort of having a belief in an animistic entity, because I've seen an animal, a pet of mine, die, and you can see the difference between a living thing and a dying or dead thing.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And I can see that a primitive person without any education
Yeah.
can imagine something like a spirit or a soul.
Passing on.
But
Yeah.
Mm.
but
Mm.
but more than that, I can't see it happening. It takes somebody to formalize it and
Yeah.
to start saying. I just found out something interesting. I didn't know that the sacrum, uh, as in the biological body part, that it's called the sacrum because the early people believe that that's where the soul or the spirit
Yeah. Yeah.
resides. I didn't know that.
They didn't
So,
know what a brain is.
Well, you've just told me something I didn't know either.
yeah,
I, I
Yeah.
didn't
I,
I
I
didn't
didn't.
know. I mean, I can see the similarity between sacrum and sacrament and
Yeah.
sacrilegious. So there's a very strong
That's
likelihood that,
part of the brain.
those words have a common origin.
Yeah.
Yes, and and,
Yeah.
and you can. And if one you mentioned Richard Carrier, and if you think about religion, if we go back to how old these ideas are, and if you don't know how reproduction works, for example, so it's a
Mm.
patriarchal society. So the man, the little man, is inside the penis, and the woman's womb is the vessel. So it's all very close to where reproduction happens. So that has to be where the soul comes from. It's logic, can't you see?
That's right. That's
It
right.
has to come
And
from there.
the dopamine effect,
Yeah.
of belief. We've been able to map that out. We actually see. I think there was one called "This Is Your Brain on God," and they found some willing Mormons
Yeah.
in the state of Utah, and they put them under some brain imaging, and they showed them they're able in real time to map what happens in the brain with dopamine while asking them questions and showing them pictures and stuff. And the bottom line is that these Mormons would react or have a rush of dopamine, uh, not to a message unless they were given a message, let's say, from what they worship. If they recognize it's from what they worship, there's a rush of dopamine. But if they showed the face of what they worship and gave them a message from another religion that doesn't apply to them, but that they weren't aware of, they would get the rush of dopamine. So this is worship of source,
Mm.
not information, which is a dangerous thing, because if you worship a source, they can give
Yeah.
you really violent
Yeah.
information, and you may act on it,
Mm.
which we see all that. But the dopamine thing is the seller for, it's the cement of all faith. And when I walked, I experienced that when I was a Christian, in my around 30 years old, for a very brief time. Very brief. I was a Christian, and I decided, let's get down to business now. I don't like have to study this Bible, but this is my duty. And very shortly after, it was the Bible that turned me atheist.
Yes.
But when I
It's a
when
great
I,
it's a great recruiting tool, isn't it?
it is, yeah. If you haven't been brainwashed as a child, you're able to say, what? Wait a minute here.
Yeah.
So that's
And,
all
and
covered in the beginning of the book. But
so I myself, despite having been brainwashed very strongly, I succeeded somehow by luck, or maybe it was the spirit or the devil, I don't know, to deconvert, and my eyes opened around about the age of 40. But I would be keen to know having basically grown up, if I understand you correctly, atheist or non-religious, obviously having had exposure to religion, what made you briefly convert? I'm very keen to hear about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was the Gospels of the events following the feeding of the 5,000. They were similar in some ways. I don't remember exactly. It's in the book. I probably can't find it quick. Actually, I just, with God's help, I opened the right page.
At the right place. It's Andrew.
I've got a bunch of them, but they don't add up at all. Well, it's too lengthy here, but it's got to do with, after the events of 5,000, the disciples all go out on a boat. There's the walking on water. In some cases, there's no walking on water.
Well, Jesus walks on. Andrew, sorry, I just have to. I'm being pedantic, but I am a teacher. I'm doing a little side project where I actually make sort of little posters about scripture, because I think most Christians believe what they believe because they don't know the Bible. So in Mark,
right, exactly, yeah.
In Mark, in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus does walk on water.
Yeah.
But in the Gospel of Matthew, in this exactly the same passage, chronologically, it's the
That's
feeding
right.
of the 5,000, then the walking, and then.
And they're all together.
But in Matthew, Peter also walks on water, and
Yeah.
so I didn't read the Luke. I didn't compare the Luke passage, but it's very interesting that you can clearly see the progression. So in Mark, it's only Jesus that walks on water, but in Matthew, Peter says, "Lord, please, can I do this too?" And then he walks.
That's right.
Let me play.
One, like, they go to different towns as well on the boat, and one of them, which one is it? They don't even get on a boat. After the feeding of 5,000, they walk to Jerusalem. They don't even.
Yeah.
So that was it. I said, what the heck is going on? So I went to the church, talked to the minister, and he said, you've got to, you got to have faith, and why don't you talk? I know some people you can talk to, some church elders. I talked to them, and after a while, it just got to be so ridiculous that that started me on. I actually cried. That's when somebody says, "Hey, you just want to be an atheist," No, I had my heart and soul in this, and of course, I'm almost at what I know now. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know enough to reject it right away. Just I'm not even looking at that, but I didn't know enough. That started me on a 40-year journey. Of much more knowledge. And I think a lot of that started with just watching animal nature shows. Evolution, you can't avoid it, so it just keeps coming in there. And understand that. And then, of course, to write the book, I did much more research on religion itself, on astronomy more. I tend to gravitate toward that anyway because my father did. So I had some basics there anyway, but to know about all the elements, all the elements come from an exploding.
Andrew, did any of your research lead you to the work of Frans de Waal, the primatologist who did very groundbreaking work in animal morality? Because one of the things that Christians claim is that we wouldn't be moral beings without some form of religion. So but I wanted to ask you. You said that you cried when you. So was it? I have two questions. Was it difficult for you to give up your faith? That's the first question, and the second one is perhaps more profound in the sense that why if we feel a sense of loss when we lose our faith, which many people do, isn't it okay to let people hang on to the lie if it comforts them? So those are my two questions.
I don't think telling someone who just lost a loved one that they're not in heaven or anything is I don't think that they would be able to grasp things. But I can tell you, as an atheist, I lost my mother in 2019. I would have to say that it's much easier to be an atheist because I know it's hard for a living brain to understand zero, absolute zero. And we were talking earlier about watching something die. I watched my mother die. I've seen animals die, and you can see the life go out.
You can see it.
Yes, the brain has energy, electrical energy, and when it dies, you're gone. You're a piece of meat, regardless of how pure that person was. We are what we are here.
That's right.
And that's the soul.
And if that goes out, it's an example of load shedding.
Yeah, it's gone. And I think
flame to
people
light.
also rely on the science that says they cling to it, that you can't destroy energy. No, you can't. You can change its form, but it doesn't mean that your consciousness is going to be attached with the bacteria and the gases that have come off your corpse.
No.
You know, you're dead. You'll never come back again. You may push up some daisies somewhere, but that's it.
Yeah. Well, Tercia mentioned Frans de Waal, and I want to plug the Origins Project because, you know, Lawrence Krauss has this Origins Project, and he has just done, I think, an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours interview with Frans de Waal. It's worth. You've got to pay to see it, but you can listen to it, the audio, for nothing.
Nice.
Oh, fantastic.
We witness some of this. We can witness, if you watch animals enough, you can witness
that
type of thing without knowing more.
John, I've been asking many questions. I have one more that I want to ask, but I want to ask if you want to do something before I ask my next question.
No, you go ahead. I've got some backed up here, but I can bring them in after you finish.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, Andrew, having experienced grief, obviously, what's your opinion about spirituality and this spirituality as a replacement? I'm thinking of people who, you know, there's esotericism. What do you say to somebody who says, "I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual"?
Well, I think that they've been turned. Here's what I think: they've been turned off by religion, but they still think that there's something that science doesn't know. And so what I think is that they need to dig deeper to see that spirit. I feel spiritually uplifted, I guess you could say, when I hear music that I love, or I got a rush of dopamine when I decided I was going to write this book.
Yeah.
I felt.
Ask John. You can ask John what happens to me when I walk into a beautiful cathedral. He's actually been a witness to it.
Well, yes. I would like to know. I know that I don't wrinkle up or burn or scream and run out. I know that. I'm fine there.
Yeah.
Well, you can ask John.
These are emotional reactions that can be inspired by beauty, by, you know, even architectural beauty, by music, by seeing interactions between people and animals, for example. All sorts of things.
Animal interactions, especially opposite or different species interacting with love.
Yes.
Necessity and stuff. I've had I've had wet eyes. Didn't come from God.
Yeah.
I was going to say before, you were talking about, you know, the immoralities and stuff. God, well, that means that we would need to accept that slavery is fine, just with a few rules.
Yes, that's right. As long as you don't beat them to death, you can beat them nearly to death is okay. It's great.
The line.
Yeah. So on the subject of spiritual, if they've come down from religious to spiritual, it makes me think they're on the way to atheism. but they probably resisting the last step because when they were theistic, they had the concept of atheism poisoned for them, and they don't want to go that far.
That's one reason I think they haven't made the connection that all scripture is religion. So without that, it's just your own idea. Now, if your idea is attached in any way to scripture, it will show, because you'll be thinking that God's watching you, or you need to be good, or you need to do this or that. It's still attached to scripture. So to be spiritual without any religious influence, you'd pretty much have to invent your own God, I guess. It's based on imaginings. But I think that these people cannot separate scripture just the same. It's still going to be based on these scriptural dogmas, and they can't separate it, even if they think they can. They're not separating it. And a little bit of education just cures it.
They're still casting about for something supernatural, whether it's a pyramid or a crystal or candles or whatever.
Yeah, it's wonder. It's more primitive, because it's awe and wonder at things that with just a little inquiry you could satisfy it. You would understand, and still be amazed if something is. I find amazing how they discovered the speed of light and what initiated it back then. Amazing.
Mind you, it's more difficult, isn't it? Finding out how everything really does work is quite an intellectual barrier compared to just accepting God done it.
Yeah, that's right. The simple story is for simple people.
I want to make a confession. So, John, maybe
really?
Yes. I've always reacted very vehemently to people who say that many atheists just replaced. So it's basically the idea of scientism that you sort of. I was always very vehement that it can't be true until. And you reminded me of that, Andrew, when you said the sense of wonder. I watched a Royal Institute lecture during the week about. It was a physics demonstration, an hour-long physics demonstration. It was fantastic. And the very last demonstration that the professor does, I can't recall his name now, is a demonstration of yttrium, which is an element that if you cool it down to about 190 degrees, it becomes a superconductor. And it floats above a ring of magnets. And the human capacity for wonder is just so amazing that as I was watching this, I'd heard about superconductors, but I'd never seen a demonstration. And when I saw this little disc float above this ring of magnets, I literally went like a person would who has a vision. So I think that we have to educate ourselves about how primitive we are, because I can see a religious person saying, yes, but you've just created a new God in science. I can see that happening. A sense of wonder does not equate to and a feeling of awe does not equate to
a scripture or a dogma or a doctrine.
Or I don't want to bow down and worship. I think. Would you say that worship is an essential element of religion?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Religion is designed to put someone at the top of the chain.
Yeah, it is a hierarchical thing.
And if you don't claim to be God yourself, you, like the Catholic Church, you're the gatekeeper. You're the one that they have to go through. If you're, even this purgatory that was invented by St. Augustine, like baptize your newborn child just in case the child dies before is able to accept Jesus. So, I mean, it's a gateway. So, the worship or religion, in answer to your question, places something at the top.
Yeah.
And the only way to get through it or to get there is through the proper chain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember years ago that a pastor had said, because I was saying, well, why do you have to go to church? Can't you just study the Bible and all that? And he said, well, yeah, that's fine. But obviously it's not what they want, because religions don't prosper very well like that. You might back them and vote, but you're not going to be spending any money in.
Yes. They want you to turn up and donate or tithe. Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. What happens, in my view, is that with the intention to gather a congregation, they want membership. And the first thing they need to do is make you dependent upon them. So they have to make you subservient. You have to want to worship something superior. And so
you're nothing without them.
Exactly. To do this, what they do is they get you when you're a child, when you're vulnerable and, willing to accept anything from an adult. They destroy your self-confidence. That's the first thing they do.
Yeah.
And at that point, you've got to rely on the authority initially of your parents, or then any adult, your teachers, and then the priests or pastors. And that's it. You're sucked in at that point. And of course, what you do is you worship this multi-tiered hierarchical system.
I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking about making another meme the other day, and I forgot what it was about. It was about that, how religion is a lot like a bad husband.
Yeah.
Gaslighting. Take away your self-esteem. Only through them are you any good.
Yeah.
Your self-esteem comes from them. They love you despite the fact that you're no good. You're not a woman, not beautiful.
Yeah.
And if you don't respect me and give me a lot of love, I'm going to beat the hell out of you. Maybe forever.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a lot like a bad husband.
Yeah.
But because it works.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah.
Well, you go ahead and make that meme, and Tercia, she's a meme maker too. She'll have a go at it as well, I expect.
Yeah.
Definitely, I definitely will. Andrew, did any of your research take you into the area of, are some people psychologically more prone to be believers? So, in other words, regardless of having been indoctrinated, are some personalities more inclined to believe? Did any of your research for the book go into that, or not exactly? Because it's that's a book on its own.
Yeah, it is. Not exactly. I do get into the mind, like the chapter or the section of the book is called "The Obstacle of Cognitive Bias." That's chapter 8. And the section is the amazing organ. So I get into the modern science on the brain, and some of the studies that included that 63-person study in the UK. I'll send you a link to that.
I'd like to see that too, please.
Yeah. So specifically what you're saying, no, I think I refer more to indoctrination at a young age, and some of it doesn't take. Like there are some that break. Well, look at some of the Islamic states, where all of them are indoctrinated, and some of them break free at the peril of being murdered. They're that sure that it's wrong, and they were indoctrinated. So that would prove alone that some minds are just can't be indoctrinated. They just make sense of the world at a very young age. And I guess, I went to Sunday schools and stuff like that when I was a kid. Not that my family wanted, but I'd be staying with my grandmothers or whatever, and I would go. And at age 5, some of the stories are just kind of silly. And you just the adults, it's the adults that are sold on it. So you sort of think, well,
yeah. You mean Jonah didn't really live in a whale?
Yeah, The Walking Dead and all this stuff,
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, coming back to life. Yeah, I know the who could forget that story?
Yeah.
Now,
Andrew,
at that age, I thought, well, maybe.
I'm keeping an eye on the time, and I really want to ask you a question. You don't have to answer
I'll
because
answer
you'll answer
anything,
anything.
anything at
Hey,
all.
John, you didn't warn him about me, did you?
No. I didn't think you believed me.
I want to ask, would you identify, and please, labels are just, I don't believe to label because people are more complex than that, but I'm very keen to pick your brain. Would you see yourself as a mythicist? Do you think there was a real Jesus? Do you, are you, so what's your opinion on that? I'm curious to know.
Well, Richard Carrier kind of solved that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was no, and it doesn't show up in history anyway. But I always use the Pliny the Younger, Emperor Trajan communication, 110 AD, so soon after the world famous Jesus healed everybody. They didn't know his name. They didn't know what Christians stood for. And in the timeline, it's a new cult that just came to be. The first Gospels come after the temple fell by Mark around 80 AD. And Pliny the Younger and Emperor Trajan's communication was about 5 years before the Gospel of John came out. It was a brand new cult.
Yeah. Well, it's not the first time, though. Well, maybe not the last time as well, because there's been a lot of religions, in quotes, air quotes, that had similar stories, about virgin birth, dying and resurrecting. This is quite a popular theme in narrative, and even more recently with more recent cults like the Mormons, for example. They can invent a new story tomorrow, and people like narrative. There'll probably be some followers.
Well, look what Scientology did. Every time I look at Tom Cruise, I think, I don't know. He just shrinks like a star. He just becomes somebody that I would like to give a talking to.
John, I'm sorry. I'm really monopolizing Andrew tonight, but
no, don't worry. That's what I pay you for.
Ask me something more difficult.
This is going to be difficult. I'm not quite sure how to phrase the question even. That's how difficult it is. So I told you about this little project of mine where I look at the Bible and I sort of do little summaries. So I was reading about the death of, it was actually about Herod. So Herod the Great died in 4 BC. So we know that historically, and it's your reference to Pliny and actual history that we know that made me think about this question that I'm still struggling to formulate, so please bear with me. But so we know that Herod the Great died in 4 BCE. So I was wondering, how does our dating system work? Because obviously Jesus, I was taught, and I'm not an historian, but I was taught that there's no year zero. So we are now in the year 2020. We are in the year 2022 of the Common Era. But was there a time when this was sort of, when the year one was sort of moved backwards? Because originally, when it was, this is a very complex. Maybe I should ask Richard Carrier to explain this.
Oh, he would know. I think it was fudged a little bit, like the Common Era and the Gregorian calendar. That was around 1500 AD, because they were trying to set a time for Easter. What date would that be? Of course, the greatest thing that ever happened on planet Earth would have been the birth of Jesus, which you can see it was the concept of Jesus that was important, not his birth date. Otherwise, it would be there. It was just the concept. So there was no date. So they had to figure out what that was. And they attempted different calendars. And of course, not knowing that it's, that we have leap year, not understanding, the the revolutions and
Yeah.
the circuit around the sun, that I think it was like, I figured that was in the book, like 640 years, and June is actually January. So it was they needed some science intervention there, and that was around the 1500s when they come up with that.
Yeah.
But is zero? I guess there would be no zero. It would be, you had to start counting from somewhere.
Well, they didn't start counting then. Those numbers were assigned hundreds of years later. Nobody went about saying it's year one now. And last year was year -1. Nobody said that.
I've said to Christians, if you could take a time machine and go back to 30 AD and look for Jesus, go to Rome, and that, nobody would know what the hell you were talking about.
But it just goes, this whole question about dating made me think that how insidious this lie is, because if I take a history textbook, if I take a grade 8 history textbook that's lying on my desk right now, it explains the dating system in terms of and until very recently, most textbooks wouldn't have Common Era, and before the Common Era, it would be before Christ and Anno Domini.
The BC.
And BC and AD.
The BC was luck. Or used like before Common Era, before Christ.
I mean, it's only been about 10 years that before the BCE and CE, as in Common Era, has become sort of, so until very recently, it was still Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. So the year of our Lord, on whom we base our dating system, was born 4 years before his era.
Bless you.
Or they would just pass that off as
Studying the calendar is interesting because, of course, until the Roman Caesars of Augustus and Julius had lived, there was no July and August.
Exactly. Exactly. It just goes to show how good we are at making up all sorts of stories. I mean, even our calendar is a story.
That's what it is. How successful a lie is. Everywhere you go, Jesus is Lord, based on what? But it's just everywhere, and it's everywhere because I think that it's the only way to keep a lie going, because if you kind of relax that, it's going to die off. You've got to keep at it. I think that's what I said. Prayers. I got in the book about the study of prayers, different studies of prayers. But prayers have been proven not to work at all. They have no effect on anything. But the prayer is the perfect tool to keep. It's a self-brainwash. It's a self-brainwashing. Can you imagine being a monk, just praying all the time? You're not going to question much. It'll be within, you can question, but it's within
especially if your income comes from being good at telling that story.
Oh my, wow, how easy. I wish our job was as easy.
Yes.
Andrew, I have another pet project but I don't have enough time. I've got 10 seconds to ask you, because you're Canadian, and this links to my pet project. What is your opinion of Jordan Peterson?
Ooh.
I don't know him. I know the name. I know the name.
Okay. That closes that subject.
John, you're so mean.
I know the name. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, we don't want to start any controversies of slagging off other podcasters.
I'm so sorry.
So,
you are forgiven. May you are blessed. You are forgiven. You are forgiven.
What I want to do now, because we are seconds away from the end of our hour, is I want to announce that next week we have another very interesting guest, and his name is Peter Rue, and his specialism is climate change. And it was Tercia who signed this one up. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, Tercia, about Peter?
Yes, I'd like to. Well, his specialism is not climate change, but he's very well read on the topic. And
Mm,
I've had online conversations with him. We've never met in person, although he is a South African. He lives in Cape Town. But
mm.
he is not convinced that climate change, the way we're experiencing it currently, is
Mm.
man made and
Anthropogenic.
anthropogenic. That's
Mm,
right. So I've had interesting discussions with him, and what tickles me about him, that's a typically South African English expression, is that he does not come across as a mad, crazy conspiracy theorist. He's actually read all the IPCC reports.
yeah,
So that's why I would like to talk to him about this, because
yeah.
although he's actually a businessman and a pilot, but
Mm,
he's not a nut.
mm.
And
But
I would,
if that was true, it would be very convenient for big industry, wouldn't it? It would be worth, if you were big industry, it would be worth devising something against, putting the onus on you
Yeah,
to watch the
yeah.
environment. It would be worth every penny if you could do that.
absolutely.
We are
No
not
question.
to blame. No. Well, that's going to be a very interesting show. I'd like to invite everybody to watch it next week at the same place and same time. Andrew and
Yeah.
Tertian, you've both been fantastic. I'm going to play the outro. So say goodbye. Thank you very
Take care.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
You're welcome. Thank you.